Hola clase. Today we're going to take notes over los verbos irregulares en el pretérito. These notes are really just writing down conjugations, but you should take note of the patterns as we go, and I'll be talking about those. So any verbs that we don't talk about here are regular verbs in the preterite. We've already covered spelling changes in the preterite that happen sometimes for those car-gar-zar verbs and those verbs that have stems that end in vowels. And we've already talked about what you do about stem changing verbs in the preterite. So these are the fully irregular verbs in the preterite tense. So the first is ir, meaning to go. In the preterite, this verb is very irregular. Its forms are fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. No accent marks, no tildes. And actually, none of the irregular verbs that we are taking notes on today have any accent marks. Okay, this is the only time in the Spanish language that two totally different infinitives have the exact same conjugation. So when you conjugate the verb ser, meaning to be in the preterite, it has the exact same forms as ir. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. The verb estar, meaning to be, is also irregular, but has different forms. So ir and ser are just completely irregular and have the same forms. Dar, to give, is di, diste, dio, dimos, disteis, dieron. Totally irregular as well. So di is I gave, diste you gave, dio he or she gave. It's in the past tense. Ved, to see, is completely irregular but has forms very similar to those of dar. Just instead of a D, it's a V. Vi, viste, vio, vimos, visteis, vieron. So again, if you make those patterns and associations, all right, ir and ser have those same forms. I'll memorize those. Dar and ved have practically the same form except for the first letter. It can help you learn the information better. So those first four verbs are separated on your note sheet with a big black line because they're the ones that are fully irregular and don't have a pattern. These other irregular verbs that follow are going to follow a pattern, and they're all going to share the same set of irregular endings. So we've learned our AR regular endings and our ERIR regular endings. This is the third set of endings for verbs in the preterite tense. All of the verbs that follow, again, are going to share these endings. E, iste, o, imos, istes, ieron, or sometimes heron. One group is the group Jota, group J, that has heron for that last form. They're kind of a combination of the AR and ERIR endings. No accent marks though. Okay, so those are the endings, and once you memorize those, you can just associate them with the stems that go with the rest. So we will write out the full conjugations, but you would be wise to learn these endings very well, and then to know that like venir, the yo form is vine, and it has those endings of e, iste, o, imos, istes, ieron. So the stem is vin, and we've got those irregular endings that we just wrote down attached to that irregular stem. Venir, to come. In the past tense here, the preterite. Okay, hacer, to do, to make, is hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicisteis, hicieron. That third person singular has a spelling change where the C in the stem changes to a Z, and that's because if I had a C there, the sound would be ico, CO says ko, but I want the sound of so I need a Z. acepta. So hice, I did or I made. Hiciste, you did or you made. Next is querer, to want, or in the preterite, it can mean to try. So that is quise, quisiste, quiso, quisimos, quisistes, quisieron. Again, these endings are shared across all these verbs, so you just need to memorize iste, imos, iste, sieron, and the stems that go with each. The irregular stem for querer is quis. Quis. To want, to love, to try. Poder, to do, to make, changes the stem to pud. Pude, pudiste, pudo, pudimos, pudistes, pudieron. That's the next one. Pudieron. Pude could mean I could or I managed to, like, it tends to imply that the action was completed. Okay, poner, to put to place. Stem is pus. And these verbs all have a U in their irregular stem, so on your note sheet they are called group U or grupo U. All right, estar means to be. Its irregular stem is estuve, and even though it's an AR verb, it still has those irregular endings of a, iste, o, imos, istes, ieron. Estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvistes, estuvieron. Estar in the preterite tense. Meaning I was when we're referring to location or emotional condition or physical condition within a specific time frame. All right, tener, to have. Sometimes in the preterite it means to get. So tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, tuvistes, tuvieron. It's a group U, stem is tu. Saber, to know information, but in the preterite generally meaning to learn, to find out when you first find out information. Supe, supiste, supo, supimos, supiste, supieron. So some verbs have meaning changes in the preterite and generally mean slightly different things when used in the preterite versus in the imperfect, the other past tense. Supe, again, usually would translate I found out information. Okay, andar means to walk. Anduve, anduviste, anduvo, anduvimos, anduvistes, anduvieron. Can also kind of mean to go. And of course, we've also learned the verb to walk, caminar. This is an alternate way to say to walk. All right, on to group jota. These verbs all have J's or jotas in their irregular stems. And in the third person plural, there's no I in the ending, dijeron. So some of the forms have I's after the J's, but not this one. And that'll be true of all of the verbs in this group. Ending is heron instead of ieron. So it's I said or I told is dije, you told or you said dijiste, he or she said dijo, dijimos, dijistes, dijeron. This verb comes up a lot in fiction, like narration. when you're saying dialogue. Next up is traer, to bring. Traje, trajiste, trajo, trajimos, trajistes, trajeron. I brought, traje. They brought, ellos trajeron. Traducir, to translate. Traduje, tradujiste, tradujo, tradujimos, tradujistes, tradujeron. I translated, you translated, we translated. Everybody translated. Next up is producir, to produce. Produje, produjiste, produjo, produjimos, produjistes, produjeron. Conducir means to drive. And that's the term for to drive used in Spain. In Latin America, people typically say manejar instead. Conducir could also be translated to conduct. So we've got conduje, condujiste, condujo, condujimos, condujistes, condujeron. All right, and then we've got haber, which in the present tense is like I, there is, there are. So in circumstances in the preterit, where we want to say there was or there were, it's hubo. And this would be like there was for events generally that happened. When describing, we'd use the other past tense, the imperfect. Okay, gracias clase. Hasta luego.